Hi, my name is Dan Paulson. Welcome to Just One Truth. This channel is about me looking for the answer to what looks like the spiritual things that we experience in life. However, I approach it with the idea in mind that there is no such thing as supernatural. So what is going on and why? And I've found some very interesting things along that particular path. So it's fun, and I just want to share it with people. Everything I talk about is... I guess I'd have to say I develop hypotheses, and I don't know if they're theories. I try to run things out mentally and experientially to the point that they make sense to me. And as we move along, I'll show you what that's about. But this video right here, what I want to do is show how I believe masters of antiquity nested lessons inside of their teachings. We're going to pretend in this video like we are masters, and we're going to take a teaching and we're going to put it inside of something and see how we can distribute that among our population from thousands of years ago. And I think that is a good way, perhaps, for us to see what they were doing, learn how the lessons are nested in, I would say, mythologies, spiritual teachings, and religions. All of them nest lessons inside of them. And a lot of it is the same lesson over and over again, and we'll see that as we move along. And in various videos, I've covered this to some degree. To be honest, the more I study it, the more I look at it, the more I analyze it, the more I kind of refine the process, the more it looks like something that is very, something that it's easy to replicate in all teachings, to look at, to unlock the teachings that's what basically I'm looking at here, is how do we nest the teaching? What did the master have in mind? And let's stop and think about that for a second. We'll pretend we are a Lao Tzu or a Buddha or a Jesus, whoever you want to. And I know that the Jesus one could be sacrilegious to some people, so it just depends on where you are with your thinking of supernatural. And so I'm not bound by that. But I think we can probably all assume that when they were teaching something, they had a lesson. They wanted you to know it. And when they put something inside of a verse that was cryptic, they didn't put something in there that allowed you to make it whatever you wanted it to be. They put something in there that was nested in a way that if you knew how to get it out, you could pull out that lesson. And if you didn't know how to pull it out, you could get out whatever you want to. The lesson... The verbiage is structured in such a way that it's a very fun thing. Back then, that's what they had. Let's imagine that for a second. That was very important for me to do, to understand this, was realizing that thousands of years ago, there was no technology, no electricity, nothing like that. Stories are what we had. We either listened to people, or you talked to people, or you thought in your mind. Those are the three things you had available to you. You didn't turn on the radio. You didn't go watch television and flip channels. You didn't do anything else media-wise. You talked, listened, or thought. Their life was a lot different than ours. They also didn't read or write for the most part. So as these people are living their lives, that's where they're coming from. They also, 2,000 years ago, don't know we have a brain. They don't know that we have a central nervous system. They know that they can think, and they know that they can feel. Those are the two things that they're describing, and when they're talking about a carnal mind or a soul, verbiage to that effect. It's all over the place. You know what I'm talking about. That's what they're referring to, that they know they have sensations, and they know that they can walk from town to town while they're talking to somebody and still make it there, that something is guiding them along the way. And I would contend that they would say, yeah, that's your soul. When we today know that we have a conscious and a subconscious mind, we kind of assume that they had all of that figured out too. They did not. When they're describing things and we're looking at them in some kind of a magical, mystical way, I think what we're doing is we lost the connection. We lost the fact that they didn't know what we know, and we have to kind of put ourselves mentally into the frame of mind that's necessary to understand what they were hearing and why they thought the way that they did. Okay, and that is pretty much a mainstay of my understanding. Now, let's pretend we are that master. You have to be a certain distance along this path. I would say to understand this, you should at least be to the point where you know that we have to turn inward, that we are acting out our lives based on our programming, and that we have to somehow take charge of that. That we realize we've woken up and realize, oh no, I'm just playing out life without being aware of it. I'm responding, and okay, so we're there. If everybody's at that point, we can proceed. And if not, just pretend on this next part. What I want to do is say that most of us already know something like, if we are hanging on to an anger, a pain, a shame, something that is hurt inside of us that we have hidden, we've got it buried away, or it's something that we can't let go of, that we're at a point where we realize we're cycling around that. We need to let it go. We need to turn loose of things. This is what Buddha's taught. This is, well, everybody has taught it. That you need to let go, you need to forgive, you need to somehow become the child again at birth, somebody who doesn't have those judgments, those shames, all of those things. So we need to pass that around. We've learned that. And we look around our community and we see a bunch of hurt people and we want to tell them that. So we tell people, look, you need to forgive who hurt you. You need to forgive who hurt you. And well, that makes sense to us. But look around the world. Look at things that you have seen on the news. I avoid the news. I avoid headlines. I avoid things like that. But you really can't. You do see crazy people acting in very crazy ways that are very angry and very focused on the fact that somebody else out there in the world is the reason that they are hurt inside. And if you tell that person they have to forgive who hurt them in order to live a better life, at the very least, they would tell you to shut the... They don't want to hear that. Your lesson's going no place. They're not going to pass that along. Meanwhile, over in the next land, somebody's on a search and needs to hear what you've got to say, but you can't get your lesson to them. So I'm kind of doing two things there. Number one, you're nesting your lesson to hide it, to make it travel in the community. But at the same time, I mentioned earlier, communication is one of the storytelling. That's a big thing for us. So we've got a couple of things going on. Number one, building fun stories that have the teachings in it. And number two, putting them in a vehicle, a story that is such that it will travel, so that everybody who knows these rules, that knows how to get the lessons out of it, will hear that story and go, okay, thank you for teaching me. It's like a code nested inside of a verbal treasure chest that travels around. However, even that sounds kind of fancy, and I want to bring it down to earth. Let's go back to our time for a minute, modern times. Let's try to tell that same story to somebody. Now, we can use plain language today, but if we didn't want to, or for some reason couldn't use plain language, we could say something like, the person is like a computer, and when they're fresh off the shelf, they can perform all kinds of things at high speeds. You just load them with the right program. But over time, they start picking up viruses and bugs and other things that it prevents them from functioning properly. And in order to restore that computer, that you must go and remove all of those viruses and the bugs and rebuild things, kind of change out, improve that network. And what we've just done right there is very ridiculously simply, in a simple way, have created an analogy of the computer, the human mind, and that's common. We see that. I'm not doing anything new right there. That's what I'm contending that they're doing. But they don't have computers. They have to use different analogs. So back again to their time, what did they have available? What did they have available to nest something in? Now, I'm not going to jump right into one of their verses. I'm going to make one up of my own. It's one that I use all along. So it's one that we can play with without any, it doesn't have any baggage to it. Nobody else has an interpretation of it. So it's a fresh verse. An anchored ship cannot sail. We as the masters teaching this, we're looking at this and realizing a couple of things. Number one, the lesson is about the person. They will know that when they read this, it is about them. And that whatever components are in the story are analogs of them in their life. So if I say a ship is anchored to something and it can't sail, that lets the person know, oh, I am the ship. I'm an analog for the ship, and I'm hanging on to something, and I can't move freely because I'm holding on to something. So there I have nested my teaching into something that is at once a completely different sound to it. It doesn't have any implication that turns inward. It just sounds like a fine sentence. This would be an example of how a Taoism or a Buddhism is taught. There's a two-layer functionality there. There is no religious layer in that. It's meant to be figured out. You're supposed to decode it. You're supposed to work it out in your mind. And it is nested inside of something that is very transportable among the general population. So as a teacher in this case, we very much want people to know you've got to let go of the things that you're hanging on to in life if you want to move along. And whoever the student is that grabs this verse or that hears it from us or from somewhere else will need to know that, yeah, like I said, it's about them and that it's about the things that they hang on to. And that when they interpret it, they realize that I cannot go free in life until I do let go of those things, and it's done. We would also look at that verse as a Taoist or as a Buddhist and know that there are two layers to that. Number one is the literal layer. The boat in the water with an anchor out isn't going anyplace. That's a true statement, but it's not the lesson. We know that when we make ourselves metaphoric representations of that teachings and that we and the story we share analogous component parts, that we become the story, that the story is about us, that's the second layer, but that turns it inward. Let's add another layer. Let's turn it into a religious verse. An anchored ship cannot sail, saith the Lord. Boom. It's religious. We just added another layer. Okay, and before I move on from that, I want to be clear and say that this is just one verse. It's an example. Religions are much more dense. It is not one verse that has the religion. It's an entire set of verses that creates the religion. So it's a much more complex string of teachings that tell you, you must forgive, you must let go. Here's how you do it. Here's what you do when you move on. There's continuous lessons along there that are nested in the same way. And again, Taoism, Buddhism, they're not nested in a way to be secret. They're only nested in a way that makes you have to figure them out. That's how you wire your brain. That's how it goes from academic to experiential. It's not just something that I was told. It's something that, okay, I get that. I get that. So that's a reason to encrypt the teaching as well. It makes the student figure it out. And that's all Taoism and Buddhism tried to do. As we go into other religions and they start adding supernatural elements as component parts of the vehicle, because it just travels much easier. If you look at where all of a sudden it goes from natural to supernatural, you see massive amounts of popularity jump into the religions. And you also see that there's massive amounts of diversity in interpretation. And now people who are whatever religion that belongs to. Well, I'm going to use Christianity because that's where my roots are, and I feel okay with picking on that one. If I was a Christian and reading that verse, I might look at it and say, well, that's a wonderful thing. What that means is that I have to let go of the fact that I don't want to leave home or leave my hometown in order to succeed in life and to get where I want to go. And that God will glorify me when I do that I will have a better life. That must be the glory of God. And people would listen to that and go, oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, thank you. That's perfect. But it's still, it's interpreted. people are looking at it as metaphoric representations of themselves, but since it has the supernatural element, it allows the person to continue looking outward. It therefore becomes an interpretation that looks outward from them instead of going into their own, what they're holding on to. It's about something they're holding on to in the physical world, not in the spiritual world or mental world. So that supernatural element allows people to take it to a different place. In fact, somebody else might come along and say, oh, I know what that means. That means that if I want to be safe and secure, I've got to find a safe harbor to anchor myself to, and that my family and my life and everything are structured right here. And I need to anchor myself so that I don't sail off free someplace, so that I stay right here within the structure. Totally opposite understanding. Still sounds good. Still outward looking. Suddenly at layer 2, we get interpretations that go all over the place because the person makes it about themselves. And because there is some supernatural element back there, that allows this to just go unquestioned. And at that layer 2, layer 1 is literal. Layer 2, interpreted in such a way that it allows supernatural explanation, but mainly it looks outward. It doesn't look inward to the soul. It looks outward to life condition, to the physical world. And that can be incredibly variable. But in all cases, the original lesson is still nested in there. It's right there for somebody who goes, it's about me, it's about my soul, it's about what I'm hanging on to. You can hang anything else you want to on there. The lesson is still in there. You can make it short. You can make it long and elaborate. You can name the port. You can name the captain. You can start naming all kinds of things and adding into it. Those are superfluous details. The lesson is still in there. You can make these stories really huge. Or you can make it short and sweet. What do you need to do? What is your population like? What do you feel you need to do to tell your story or to get it out there? Anyway, there's too much there to even speculate on. So the important thing really is, how do they structure it? How do they nest it in? And the reason I believe that this is accurate is because if you continue to grab verses from anybody, whether it is from Lao Tzu, from Jesus, from Muhammad, and you use this process, you will find they teach the same things. Yeah, it's kind of astounding. It almost seems to me, looking at the big picture, as though there's like this network of knowledgeable, look inward kind of people that were around the world that realized that around the world people were not going to do that. So they told stories and made stories and shared stories. There's a lot of people that think there was a lot of copying going back and forth. Yeah, I think so. I think there's a reason for it. Shared stories, like in biblical floods, are about going in and purging yourself of all of the things that you have picked up. It's a rebirth. That's a big story that has the metaphoric and analogous representations of the human having to clean themselves out, but getting rid of all of the things that we've picked up along the way in life. And that in the end, everything is fresh and clean. Yeah, it's a rebirth story. Jesus would tell one saying, wash the inside of the cup, because whoever made the outside also made the inside, or one of those two around. It's still about cleaning out the inside of yourself. And of course, that references a spiritual cleansing that they're talking about that we know today would be probably a mental cleansing, a perception. How do you feel? How do you hurt? Yeah, those are the things that we are trying to go after. And that's what they were trying to teach, how to let go of things, how to become free, how to live a good life. Okay, I guess I'm starting to do my standard meandering here. This video was about nesting lessons, how they're nested. And really the idea that you turn it inward, leave out the supernatural. Just make it natural about yourself and your mind. Make your mind the soul, and make all of the elements in the story that they use, recognize which parts are about you and about your life and which parts are just there to carry the story, to create that big fun story to pass along, or whatever they made them big or small for. I'm sure there's a lot of variation. Look like today, playing games or reading books or things like that. There's short things, there's big things, there's different methods of teaching, and they used them too. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it and that it was helpful to someone, and I will see you on the next video.